Grade 12 Economics. Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Mhlongo, back here with you to continue with our microeconomics. And the topic of the day is imperfect market. Under imperfect markets, we are tackling monopoly. Last week, we covered on imperfect markets and we covered the whole topic or the whole chapter. Today, we are moving on. However, we'll only touch on monopolies today. Then next week, we'll be touching on oligopolies and monopolistic competition. So please join me. Let's see what I have for you in the booklet. So these are the lesson objectives that will be achieved during the course of this lesson. You must ensure that after this lesson, we have understood types and examples of monopolies, characteristics of monopolies, monopoly costs and revenues, equilibrium positions for the monopolist firm. It is believed that you already know the following content based on microeconomics. Characteristics of monopolies that you covered in grade 10 and grade 11. Types of monopolies. And then here is the lesson. It's under imperfect markets. It is very important for you to know that there is a huge difference between perfect markets and imperfect markets. Like we explained last week about perfect markets, to say that's a market structure that exists when there are many buyers and sellers, with none of them having an influence over the price. However, if we talk about imperfect markets, we refer to the market structures that do not comply with regulations of perfect markets. So it will be discussed in detail on the next slide so that we can understand the difference between the two. So the imperfect markets, they do not meet basic standards of hypothetical, perfect or purely commoditic market. So we regard them as imperfect because firstly, they have an influence or control over the price. Secondly, some of them are faced by high barriers to entry, meaning the market entry is not free and accessible. Thirdly, some of them are having incomplete information provided. So those are some of the things that result to the market to be seen as imperfect markets. Some of them have collusion, like oligopoly. So the perfect market, that's when, remember, the price is mainly determined by market forces, demand and supply, without any influence by buyers and sellers. Hence, we regard them as price takers. So in this case, they are the price setters. And if we divide them, we have the monopolies, we have monopolistic, we have oligopolies. They all have the differing behavior that make them to be seen as components of imperfect markets. Imperfect markets are characterized by having competing for market share, so they compete for consumers, and then there are high barriers to entry that will block the entry of new businesses, and then they sell either differentiated or unique or heterogeneous products. And then there are few sellers that are within the market, especially if we talk about the oligopoly and the monopoly as the single firm that supply the entire market. Market structures that are categorized as imperfect market include, like I've mentioned, monopolies, oligopolies, and monopolistic competition. All businesses that are part of this structure that have been mentioned are the part of the imperfect markets. So the imperfect market structures now, I'm trying to preview on slightly some details on the monopoly. So it's an imperfect market structure at which only one seller exists to supply the unique product to the entire market. So there's only one firm that's existing in this kind of the market, which supply or produce unique or heterogeneous product to the entire market. It is the only seller of the product that does not have any perfect or close substitute. That simply indicates that under the monopoly, if ever the product is supplied by the monopoly's business, that will mean if the firm does not have the product at the moment, consumers will go without the product because this product produced by these monopolies are unique. Unique product means the product is heterogeneous. It is not similar to any other product that can be found in the market, in markets around. So it is the only supplier of this unique product. So if the consumers cannot find the product available in the market, they go without the product. Then oligopolies. This is the imperfect market structure that exists when there are few large firms and many buyers. So these few large firms can produce either homogeneous products or differentiated products. Remember, if we talk of oligopoly, in there we have two types of oligopolies, namely the pure oligopoly as well as differentiated oligopoly. So the pure oligopolies are the ones that produce homogeneous products or similar products or identical products. But the differentiated oligopolies are the ones that produce differentiated products. So it will be discussed in details when you get to the oligopoly as a market structure. Monopolistic competition. So this one is the imperfect market structure that exists when there are many buyers and sellers. So you must know this. Even under monopolistic, there are many buyers and sellers. However, each seller has an influence over the price, unlike under perfect market. Remember, we said under perfect market, there are many buyers and sellers. However, none of them has an influence over the price. Under the monopolistic, there are many buyers and sellers. However, they have an influence over the price. Firms are seen as price setters. So that's why they are categorized as the part of imperfect market. So there's a big question here. Maybe it can be 4 marks or 8 marks. How do imperfect market structures affect consumer and economic welfare? If ever we are faced by imperfect market structures, how do they affect the consumer welfare and economic welfare? Meaning, how do we as consumers get to be affected negatively and positively by imperfect market, namely monopolies, oligopolies, and monopolistic competition? Firstly, we start with the monopoly. Under the monopoly, remember we said there is only one seller that sells the unique product. So normally, the consumer welfare under the monopoly is highly compromised because consumers are mainly entitled to demand the product from only one supplier. So if one supplier is productive inefficient, that will mean some of the consumers will go without the product, which will simply indicate that there won't be enough goods available within the market due to the fact that the firm or that particular supplier under the monopoly is inefficient. So consumer welfare is highly compromised in that case. Also, remember, monopolies are not having any competitor. They are the only supplier of a particular product in the particular market. For instance, in South Africa, we talk about Eskom as the main supplier or the only supplier of electricity. If ever faced by load shedding crisis, that will simply mean that we are without electricity and there is no other alternative that we can bring easily. Hence, we say there are no perfect substitutes for such products. So, if ever the product is not available, at the time the consumers will go without the product, which also compromises their welfare because they need the product. They must get the product at any time and at any quality and at the right time. So in this case, it is highly compromised. Also remember that monopolies have this tendency. They are the price setters, so that simply indicates that they have an influence or control over the price. They only use market signals to give them the claims on the size of output they can produce. They set their own prices. So by doing so, for them to keep up with their profits or to achieve supernormal profits, in both short run and long run, they increase their prices and decrease output. For that fact, they compromise consumers because they end up being exploited by these suppliers since they charge higher prices due to the fact that they know that they don't have any choice over the product. It is the firm is the only supplier of that particular product in that particular period. And then if we talk about oligopolies, oligopolies are having this tendency of collusion. So they compromise the consumer welfare because if they decide to collude and form measures, that simply indicate that they limit and reduce competition. If they reduce competition by formulating one firm, that simply indicates that consumers won't be having maximum of choices to choose from. So that alone results to the oligopolies compromising welfare of the consumers in the negative way. At the same time, they are also involved in this price fixing. Once they are involved in price fixing, they decide to set one price for the particular product. All of those firms that should be competing, they decide on one price, either implicitly or explicitly. That has a bad effect on the consumer because as they fix prices, they ensure that they achieve abnormal or high profits. For that sake, consumers will be exploited to high prices. And then also the monopolistic competition. Remember, under the monopolistic competition, we say in they are the price setters. So they always set the price that will allow them to achieve high profits. Also, at the same time, the market information is incomplete. Consumers are not having complete information about prevailing market conditions. So they have to go to the market to discover that information all the time. If there are changes, it's rare that they discover information on time. So that one alone also results to it compromising the consumer welfare, because consumers have a right to be fully informed about what is happening in the market, about where they can find the product, how are the product being qualified, how much is the price of the product. That is very important to be known by the consumers for them to make well-informed decisions. So they affect consumer welfare mostly in a bad or negative way. So let's check. Social effects of imperfect markets. Control over the price result to consumers' exploitation to high prices. Yes, if ever the firm is a price setter, it sets the price that allows it to achieve supernormal profits in both short run and long run. This decrease social welfare and increase the level of poverty to the marginalized. If ever firms are setting the highest prices, that results to some people or some consumers going without the product, meaning goods are then now produced only for those who can afford. Those who are not affording because of high prices will go without the product. So that alone compromises consumer welfare. Consumers might be in need of the product only to find that the product is too expensive for them to afford. So they choose not to buy the product because they are not affording. Less or minimum consumer choice compromises social welfare. Consumers are having a right to choose from a variety of goods and services within the market. So if there are less consumer choice being made available for consumers, then compromise their choice, compromise their welfare, compromise their living standards. So it compromises consumer choice because now, like the monopoly is the only supplier of a unique product. If you cannot find the product supplied by the monopoly, you go without the product because the same product does not have any perfect substitute. That is bad. That compromises consumer welfare. Barriers to entry and less market competition decrease efficiency, innovation, and quality of goods and services. So since there are high barriers to entry, there are those obstacles that block entry of new businesses within the market, which can either be natural or artificial. That will lead to what? It will lead to less market competition. So if there's less market competition, that will mean then the quality of goods supplied by those businesses in that particular market will be compromised because there won't be much motive for firms to be innovative and creative. So the quality will be compromised because of less competition. For instance, if the monopoly, let's refer to the monopoly, the firm is the only supplier of the product. Is there any motivation for the firm to be innovative? No, there's no motivation. Is there any motivation for the firm to produce high quality of goods and services? No, there's no motivation because the firm is not faced by any competition. So this compromises both allocative and productive efficiency, so which lead to the firms becoming productive or technically inefficient and allocative inefficient. The quality of goods is highly compromised if ever firms are not faced by a high level of competition. Imperfect market information results to buyers making improper economic decisions and make market less accessible to new entrants. So since under imperfect markets, firms are not providing enough information, especially oligopoly and monopoly, that results to firms that are willing to enter the market not being able to enter as they do the market research because the market information is not completely available. The market information is hidden by those existing competitors. So that results to less competition because firms find the lack of information being a barrier to entry for them to enter and compete within the market. Collusive behavior by oligopolies through illegal measures and price fixing limit competition and compromise consumer freedom of choice. If ever firms under oligopoly are involved in collusion, that limit or compromise the consumer choice. Consumers find themselves without any choice because firms, after fixing the price, they sell the product at the same price, which results to the consumer finding no difference if ever the consumer go to one market or another supplier. So that results to consumers being compromised because they must have a choice. They must compare prices. But if firms are selling the product at the same prices, now that means consumers are not having any benefit from from going from choosing one firm over another, because they are all selling maybe the same product at the same price. So consumer choice is highly compromised. If ever firms are deciding to form the merger or they get together to become a single business, that reduce consumer choice, that reduce competition, which lead to the consumers now being exploited to high prices because the competition has been eliminated within the market. And then economic effects of imperfect market. Market share competition results to anti-competitive practices or behavior by some businesses to win consumer interest. Yes, we know that especially under what we call oligopoly, firms find themselves competing using anti-competitive strategies that will lead to them making those improper decisions for the market. As they make those improper decisions that affect the market competition, you find that firms are using aggressive advertising. Also on that advertising is unethical. By doing so, that result to some other firms being seen as selling very much superior product than those of the competitors. So also, if firms are deciding to steal each other's ideas through maybe implicit collusion, or they work together over explicit collusion, that is also bad for the market, because it limits the competition and compromises the quality of goods. And once the competition is being reduced, it will be difficult for other firms to enter the market, because there will be few firms that are in full control over the market, while those new firms that are willing to enter, they will be having less market share to the fact that the competition has been claimed and has been reduced by the collusive behavior or anti-competitive practices that are implemented by existing firms within the market. Less output size by monopolies and oligopolies prevent opportunities for employment, intentional competitiveness, and economic growth. Yes, if ever the firm is the only supplier, automatically there will be less output size. It becomes technically inefficient within the economy or within the market. Also, within oligopoly, they produce relatively less products, which will always result to South Africa finding it difficult to be competitive in the global market. So it is very important for firms to produce more goods within the market so that they can even be competitive in the foreign markets. Remember, also, if there's less output, we tend to have high prices prevailing in the market. But if there's high output size, that leads to price being decreased, which results to consumers' living standard being improved, because they can afford more of those goods and services. Government intervention in monopolies prevents economic efficiency and foreign investments. We know that if ever the government intervenes in monopolies, that will simply compromise the market efficiency and economic efficiency. Remember, once the government decides what to produce, how and for whom to produce, that will mean other firms will find it difficult to enter the market because of barriers to entry that are protecting that particular business. So in that case, the market efficiency and economic efficiency will be compromised. Also, that will be discouraging foreign investors to bring their investments in the country, because they are not willing to invest in the country where there is too much government intervention. So here is the monopoly being discussed. What is meant by the monopoly? So the monopoly is the market structure that exists where there is only one seller in the market who sells a unique product and supplies the entire market. The monopolist business, that means the business is the only supplier of a heterogeneous or unique product, and the product sold by the business does not contain any perfect substitute. That simply indicates that the consumer will have to buy from the monopoly. If it is not willing to buy from the monopoly, it goes without the product. Also, the monopoly's business supplies the entire market. It has the responsibility to supply the entire market. If ever we talk about electricity industry, Eskom is responsible to supply electricity in the whole of, to all South Africans within the country. That alone is an issue. What if it becomes inefficient? Some of the consumers will go without the product. The monopoly market is not accessible to new firms. The market entry is completely blocked. Yes, firms are not able to enter the market, or new firms are not able to enter the market and compete, because there are high barriers to entry that prevent the entry of new businesses. Those barriers to entry can either be natural or artificial. If we talk about the natural barriers to entry, we refer to barriers to entry such as economies of scale. Those are barriers to earn that are economic in nature. So economies of scale is when the business can produce more goods and services at the lower cost per unit and sell them at the lower cost. That becomes a barrier to entry because it is capable of blocking new business that are willing to enter, which are faced by the challenge of these economies of scale. If the business is faced by the challenge of these economies of scale, that business cannot compete effectively with the business that is faced by economies of scale. So it becomes a barrier to entry because if the business is forcing to enter in the market, it will be difficult for it to be more competitive due to the fact that it will be selling its goods and services at the highest cost while the competitor is selling its goods at the lower cost. So it becomes a natural barrier to entry. And then if we talk about artificial barriers to entry, we refer to those barriers to entry that are created through mostly legislation. For instance, patents or exclusive rights. Remember, the patent allows the business to be the only supplier of a particular product at a given period of time without any competition. Once the business owns the patent, that means other firms that are willing to enter the market cannot enter that particular market because the patent, the legal document, blocks the entry of new businesses within the market. So that explains artificial barriers to entry that exist within monopoly. That's why we say the market for the monopolies is completely blocked. It is not accessible to new firms because of those obstacles that exist within the market. Some of them are natural, some of them are artificial. The natural ones we refer to economies of scale. Artificial ones we refer to those that are created through legislation to protect some businesses from competitors. The monopolies firm makes supernormal profit or economic profit in both short run and long run. Because only if its revenues, either total revenues exceed total cost or average revenues exceed average cost, then the firm will be making economic profit or supernormal profit. Remember, economic profit is economic condition that occurs when the firm's revenues are greater than the firm's cost that incurred in the business. So the firm can, however, under the monopoly, make economic loss if its total costs are more than total revenues or average costs are more than average revenues. It can make economic loss. Like Eskom, we know it is making economic loss, as much as we know that it is not profit motive, but as a monopoly, it is making economic loss. But we have this perception of monopolies as the only suppliers of a particular product are making both economic profit, are making economic profit in both short run and long run. However, it can make economic loss if its revenues are lower than the cost incurred in the business. It, however, does make economic loss if its average cost exceed average revenues or total cost exceed total revenues. The product or a service produced by monopoly firm does not have the perfect substitute. It is difficult to substitute the product produced by the monopoly because we regard them as unique product or heterogeneous product. It is not easy to replace them because they are not easily substitutable due to the fact that there are no easy or perfect alternatives that are available for us to substitute those goods and services. Examples of monopoly in South Africa include the De Beers Diamond Selling Organization, and then Transnet. Transnet is the only supplier, is the only business that provides railways in South Africa. And then Denel is the only business in South Africa responsible for the production of firearms and military weapons. Eskom is the only supplier of electricity in South Africa so far. And then South African Breweries is the only company responsible for beverage or alcohol production and supply in South Africa. So here we go now, we discuss them. We have types of monopolies, namely natural monopolies, artificial monopolies, as well as local monopolies. If we talk about the natural monopoly, we refer to the monopoly that exists if barriers to entry are economic in nature. That's a natural monopoly. That's when the barriers to entry that exist in that particular monopoly are not created through legislation, but occur economically. Like when the business is too large to the point that it is having economies of scale, that business will block the entry of new businesses automatically without any legislation or any patent, because businesses will find it difficult. They will be scared to enter the market and compete with that particular business that is too large due to the fact that it produces at the lower cost per unit and sell its goods and sell at the lower cost per unit. So those that are willing to enter will be facing unfair competition. And then we talk about the length of artificial monopolies. Those are monopolies that exist when barriers to entry are not economic in nature. For instance, I made an example about patents. Patents are legal documents that allow the firm to be the only supplier or producer of a particular product for the given period of time. It is created through legislation to allow that firm to be the only supplier. So that creates an artificial monopoly, because that barrier to entry is artificial, is not natural. We talk about exclusive rights. When the firm owns a right exclusively to be the producer of a particular product, other firms are not owning that right. For that sake, then, it's a barrier to entry to new business that are willing to enter the market. And that barrier to entry is artificial because it's created through legislation. We have local monopolies. Local monopolies refer to monopolies that prevail because of a geographical area. In this case, we mean the situation. There can be more businesses available in a country producing this particular product. However, in a particular geographical area, there is only one supplier of that particular product. So that particular supplier becomes a local monopoly. For instance, we say in the certain zone or certain area, there is one medical doctor that is available in there. Then the other doctors are available maybe in town. In the location, there's one doctor. In that particular location, that particular medical practitioner is the local monopoly because he or she does not have any competitor around. That's why we say now it becomes a monopoly. However, locally, there are other suppliers of the product across the country and within the province or within the region. However, in that particular geographical area, there's only one supplier of that particular product. So that creates a local monopoly. Hence, I'm saying it is created because of a certain geographical area having a single supplier of a particular product. While in other areas, yes, there are suppliers, but in this area, the supplier does not have any competitor. So the supplier becomes a local monopoly. Here is natural monopoly being explained. A natural monopoly is a type of monopoly that exists typically due to the high startup cost. If ever there is a high capital requirement for the firm to enter the market, that automatically becomes the barrier to entry for new firms that are willing to enter the market. If they don't have enough capital, they are blocked automatically. Not because of legislation or the patent, but they are blocked by the system. There must be more capital available for the business to enter the market. If it does not have that capital, the firm cannot enter the market. So high startup cost or startup capital tend to be too high. Or powerful economies of scale. If the firm is faced by the advantage of economies of scale, that will lead to the firm being the only supplier, because smaller firms will find it difficult to enter and compete with that particular business within the market. And then we continue. Natural monopolies are allowed when a single firm can supply a product or a service at the lower cost than any other potential competitor, but are often heavily regulated to protect consumers. So they mainly prevail if only supplier will be there to supply the entire market. And then a company with a natural monopoly is the only provider of a product or a service in the industry. This company is the only supplier, does not have any competitor. And then we continue with the natural monopoly. Natural monopoly can also arise when one firm is much more efficient than multiple firms in providing a good or a service in the market. If one firm is more efficient, that firm will find itself being a natural monopoly, because other firms that maybe were competing will find themselves facing a challenge of economic loss and even shutting down, because the firm will be too efficient to the point that it will be producing large output size, selling at the lower cost per unit, resulting to competitors finding it difficult for them to survive in the market. Then the firm will remain as a natural monopoly because it is very much efficient compared to its existing competitors, which will be driven out of the market by their inefficiency level. A good example of this is the business of electricity transmission, where once a grid is set up to deliver electric power in a country. So there is only one grid that is set up. Eskom is the best example of natural monopolies in South Africa. Eskom does not have any perfect competitor. As much as there will be sub-branches of Eskom, but Eskom remains the main supplier of electricity in South Africa. But if we can move to maybe solar energy, that will mean maybe some other businesses, industries can come on board and supply electricity. But so far, we regard Eskom as a natural monopoly because the barriers to entry in there are of economic in nature, and also there is a high level of infrastructural cost and startup cost that is required for one to enter the market. And then the formation of natural monopolies. Firstly, it occurs when a company takes advantage of an industry, high barriers to entry, to create a moat or a protective wall around its operations. High barriers to entry are often due to the significant amount of capital needed to purchase fixed assets a company needs to operate. So that is barriers to entry. That will be, this high capital that will be seen as a barrier to entry. So if the firm, like I've mentioned before, does not have enough capital or startup costs, the firm cannot enter the market to compete. Only big firms with more capital can enter to compete. So that creates a natural monopoly, which is what we call the high capital or high startup cost that is required for firms to enter to purchase its assets for its own operations. Secondly, it occurs where producing a large scale is so much more efficient than small-scale production that a single large producer is sufficient to satisfy all available market demand. If a single business have enough production to produce and supply the entire market, then that can create the natural monopoly. That firm is big enough to supply the entire nation with a particular product, so that can allow it to be a natural monopoly. And then because their costs are high, small-scale producers cannot simply compete with the large-scale producers, lower-cost producers within the market. So it's always difficult for the firms that are faced by a high cost of production and producing less quantities of goods and services while charging high prices to compete with those firms that are producing at the lower cost per unit. It's always difficult. It's always difficult for them to compete with those businesses that are highly efficient, because those businesses are capable of producing using less resources but producing highest level of output and sell that output at the lower cost. So no business can find it easy to compete with such business if ever that business is faced by an issue of diseconomies of scale. And then artificial monopoly. Artificial monopoly exists when obstacles to entry of other firms are not economic in nature. So when barriers to entry are not economic in nature, that creates an artificial monopoly. This means that artificial monopoly exists because of regulations created to protect the industry. It can be regulation created through legislation to ensure that the industry is highly protected, maybe because it produces the very important or necessary product for the nation. Then the business can be seen as what we call an artificial monopoly, but it's protected by the patent, not protected by natural barriers to entry. Startup costs might be lower to block the entry of competitors. Yes, startup costs in this case can be lower, but patents or licensing allow a single supplier to serve the entire market. So there can be lower startup costs required for other firms to enter. However, there will be licenses or patents that will be existing to block the entry of new businesses. So that alone will be resulting to what we call an artificial monopoly. Then pharma businesses own some rights to some specific drugs they have developed. So there are some patents that have been developed or licenses that are developed to private pharmacists on their own drugs that they have developed. So that alone will be blocking other pharmacists from producing that drug, because the patent allows that firm to be the only producer of this particular drug. How is it formed? I mean, artificial monopoly. An artificial monopoly has no advantage of production efficiency over small firms, but nonetheless manages to drive all of its competitors out of the business or the market to remain as the only producer of the product in the product in the market or the industry. So in this case, the artificial monopolies are capable of buying out competitors. If the competitor is coming in to compete, it will enter, because barriers to entry are like we don't have high startup costs. However, the issue here can be this monopoly that's existing will be buying out new businesses that are entering the market, so that it remains as the only supplier of a particular product within the market. That creates artificial monopolies. Some businesses become artificial monopolies through buying out competitors from the market to increase their market dominance. Yes, if ever a firm is entering the market, it will be bought out by the competitor, so that the existing firm remains the only supplier of the product. Artificial monopolies are therefore formed through licensing or patents, which legally makes a supplier the only producer of a particular product for the given period of time. So licenses or patents are the one that forms mainly artificial monopolies. Even buyouts, they can also result to the firm becoming the only supplier, because any competitor that is willing to enter the market will be bought out by the existing firm, so that the firm will remain dominating the entire market. and then local monopolies. Local monopoly exists in a smaller scale when in a particular region there is only one supplier of a specific product, like I mentioned. There are variety of suppliers across the province, across the country, but in a certain region, there is only one supplier of a product. Then that supplier becomes, or that firm or business becomes the local monopoly. There are no restrictions or barriers to entry into the market, but geographical area makes a particular service provider a monopoly if he or she does not have competition. Like I mentioned, if ever there is a certain general doctor in a particular region and then does not have any competitor within that particular region, that general doctor becomes a local monopoly in that particular area because he or she is not facing any competition. Also, you can have the case of maybe retail stores in the particular town or city, like small towns. There is maybe there's only one retail food retailers. In that case, if it is the only supplier without any competitor in that area, it becomes a local monopoly because it is not facing any competition. It is the only supplier of that particular product in that particular region or area. For example, a medical doctor can be a monopoly if he or she is the only service provider in the particular region. So it doesn't mean that the medical doctor is a monopoly per se, but become the local monopoly if in the area he or she is the only service provider. There is no other service provider that is providing the same service within the area. So he or she becomes a local monopoly. Then cost and revenues for the monopolies. Remember, we discussed the likes of all costs. There were 8 that were discussed on the previous lesson, and revenues, there were 3 that were discussed. But now we need to check the cost and revenues for monopolies now because their graphs their curves are not similar, especially the marginal revenue and average revenues. They are different from that one of the perfect market. They are downward sloping, and there's also a slight difference between them all. The monopoly's marginal revenue from each unit is sold does not remain constant as in the case of perfect market. Why it doesn't remain constant? It does not remain constant because the firm has an influence over the price. The firm will always increase the price to decrease the output, or decrease the price to increase the output. That will result to whatever quantity produced by the firm being indicated along the downward sloping demand curve. The monopoly faces the downward sloping demand curve, indicating that for any additional unit sold, the price must be lowered. So if the firm wants to produce an extra unit and sell an extra unit, the firm must lower the price. In that case, that will always lead to the marginal revenue differing from average revenue curve. So the price that the monopolies can get for each additional unit of output must fall as the monopolies increase its output. Like I mentioned, for the monopoly to sell an extra product, what does it do? It lowers the price and increases the output size. That will always affect the revenues and by the business. Consequently, the monopoly's marginal revenue will also be falling as the monopolies increase its output. When the monopolies increase the output, remember, the price will be decreasing. That will be decreasing also the marginal revenue for the business. So monopoly's MR, or marginal revenue, lies below average revenue. Yes, the monopoly's marginal revenues is lying below average revenue. They are only equal on your top right, where they are starting, but from then they split, and then AR will be above MR. MR will be cutting axis in the middle, horizontal axis in the middle in there. It can even be 0 and be negative, but AR, or average revenue, will never be 0 if the firm is still producing a certain level of output. But MR can be 0 and be negative while the firm is still producing some goods and services. For that reason, MR and AR are 2 different curves under the monopoly. They are not the same curve. Unlike in the perfect market, under perfect market, we said AR equals to MR equals to D. In this case, AR or average revenue is equal to the demand curve, but MR alone is not equal to the demand curve because they are not similar. As much as the firm start to produce more output, it has to lower the price. That will result to marginal revenue decreasing faster. That alone result to them not being the same curve. They all begin at the same point on our vertical axis on your top left. As they slope downward, the AR will be above, MR will be beneath, and then in that case MR can even be zero or be negative, but AR will never be zero if the firm is still having a certain output producing within the market. Unlike in the perfect market, imperfect market average revenue AR and the marginal revenue MR curve are two separate curves. They are not identical. They are totally different. The marginal revenue curve is negatively sloped and lies below the average revenue curve, except on the first top left unit where they are equal. Like I mentioned, they are equal on the first top left where they start, and then they split downward. They will always be separated because MR can be zero, but AR can never be zero. So that alone makes them to be separate curves. As the firm produces and sells an extra unit, it must lower its cost, which will be indicated along the demand curve. So that will result to the marginal revenue decreasing even faster. The reason for the marginal revenue curve lying below average revenue curve is that the firm must reduce the price if it wants to sell any extra additional unit. For the firm to sell any extra additional unit, the price must be lowered. So as the price is lowered, that will mean marginal revenue will be decreasing. Marginal revenue earned from the sale of additional unit will always be lower than average revenue earned. That makes this curve to be separate curves. Average revenue cannot be zero, like I've mentioned, for the firm, while marginal revenue can be zero at the point where it cuts horizontal line or horizontal axis halfway, and even be lower than zero if it goes even further below horizontal line. So those are some reasons why marginal revenue and average revenue under monopoly or imperfect markets are not the same curve. Here we go, marginal revenue and average revenue curves for the monopoly. You can see we have revenues on the vertical axis, we have quantity on the horizontal. Then we have this demand curve, which is AR equal to the D. So the AR or average revenue equal to the demand under what you call the monopoly. But you must be careful when you draw these graphs. Avoid the situation where you will say AR is like this. It touches horizontal axis. Once it touches horizontal axis, you mean AR equals to zero. So in that case, you must be careful. It should end just above there, like I've done here. It must not touch horizontal axis because that seems indicate that AR can be zero the same way as the marginal revenue. While our argument we say MR can be zero and be below zero, but AR cannot be below zero. So avoid drawing the AR curve to this situation. It will be wrong. And then this is our marginal revenue. You can see it cuts our what we call horizontal axis in the middle here, and then the red line is our MR. There you go, it's marginal revenue. It can be zero, can also decrease to be below zero, like you see here is -2. Check, like I mentioned before. They both start at the same point in there for the monopoly. They are both equal on our top left. This is the point I'm talking about. But as they slope downward, they split and separate each other to the point that the average revenues will be above in this position, and then marginal revenue will be below. That is caused by the fact that has been discussed in the previous slide to say, for the firm to sell any extra additional unit, the firm must lower the price, which will be decreasing or lowering marginal revenue. And also, marginal revenue can be zero while the firm is producing a certain output, but average revenue will never be zero if the firm is still having the output to produce. So this is the explanation. The MR MR curve is negatively sloping, meaning it's downward sloping, starting from the top left to the bottom right, but it cuts horizontal axis in the middle. It is always below average revenue. You can see it is always below. As output increases, the price will decrease. So for the firm to increase the output size, it must lower its prices. For the firm to sell an extra additional unit, the price must be lowered under the monopoly. So this decreases the marginal revenue or MR. MR curve therefore lies below AR curve, as we see. AR curve
The road to success is to commit to yourself. In order for you to become who you want to become as a student, you need to commit to reading your books, to studying, to bettering yourself. I know it's not going to be easy. Actually, work, the results. Some putting
dreams, not your mom's dream for your life. What is your dream? Is it to get a bursary? Is it to study science? Is it to become a DJ? Is it to become a singer? What is your dream? Iphupho lakho. Once you have that dream, what I need you to do, I need you to write it down. Ingole mofati. Write it down, ibhale phansi, and read it each and every single day when you wake up. Read it each and every single day before you go to bed, and remind yourself of where you want to see yourself. What is your dream? Write it down, meditate on it, and go after it with everything that you have.
hours in your books. I know it's not going to be easy. Actually, no one said it will be easy. But if you keep pushing and if you keep believing a little more in yourself, then the results will show in your life. Commit and become.
Okay, we are back. Sorry, there was a technical error, but we are back again. So now we are moving to the average revenues. So average revenue is downward sloping, meaning it is negatively sloping, the same as demand curve that you are familiar with. Under the monopoly, average revenue or AR is downward sloping, starting from the top left of your vertical axis to the bottom right. It is the same curve as demand curve for the monopoly's firm, labeled AR equals to D. They are both equal. Demand curve decreases with the increase in the quantity as prices decrease. That results to the negative downward sloping. Remember, as the quantity increases that has been sold, that means the demand curve must also be sloping down because the firm will be lowering the price. If ever the quantity decreases, that will mean the firm has increased the price, then the quantity decreases. That's why we say the demand curve is negatively sloping, the same as average revenue. Average revenue decreased because with each subsequent additional in quantity, its marginal revenue decrease, and eventually with each additional unit, quantity in the market, average revenue continues to fall. Then the demand curve of the monopoly's demand curve is negatively sloping or downward sloping, which means start from the top left to the bottom right. But you must always remember the following: the demand curve for the monopoly represent the firm and the entire monopoly's market, because the firm is the only supplier of a particular product without any closed substitute. So this demand curve that we'll be showing indicates strictly represent the firm and the entire market. For instance, electricity suppliers in South Africa. Eskom is the main supplier of electricity, so there is one demand curve for the electricity demand. So that demand curve represents Eskom as well as the entire electricity industry in South Africa. Since the monopoly is the only supplier of the whole market, its demand curve represents the firm and the entire market or the industry. Unlike in the perfect market, the monopoly is facing the downward sloping demand curve, because for the firm to increase the output, it must always decrease the price. For any increase in output, the firm must lower the price. That results to the demand curve for the monopoly being downward sloping. Influence or control over the price allows the monopoly to charge prices based on the output it's willing to supply. The firm, like I've mentioned, it will always increase the price to reduce the output size, or lower the price to increase the output size. So they have an influence or control over the price to tamper with the size of output they are willing to produce within the market. The demand curve is relatively inelastic, indicating, remember that. So under the monopoly, our demand curve is downward sloping. However, it is relatively inelastic because it simply indicates that the firm is the only supplier of the product without any perfect substitute. If ever the price is changing, consumers become less sensitive to the change in price because they don't have any other substitute product to buy from any other supplier, because the firm is the only supplier of this particular product. So this demand curve is relatively inelastic. If you can remember your grade 11 elasticity of demand, the demand curve for the monopoly is relatively inelastic to indicate that consumers are less sensitive to the price change due to the fact that the product produced by monopoly does not have any perfect substitute. It is the only available product. If the consumer cannot buy from this firm, will go without the product. Therefore, consumers become less sensitive to the change in price to the fact that they have no other alternative choices. The monopoly firm is the only supplier of a unique product within the market. No alternative or substitute products are made available. The demand curve for the monopoly therefore represents the monopoly's firm and the entire market or the entire industry. It does not only represent the firm like you saw under perfect market. It represents the firm alone as well as what you call the entire market for that particular product, because there is no any other supplier that is supplying the product without that particular specific monopoly. Any change in price and quantity is reflected along the demand curve. Yes, any change or increase or decrease in the price is indicated along the demand curve. So here is the demand curve, vertical axis, horizontal axis. Then we have our price on the vertical, quantity on the horizontal. There is the demand curve being downward sloping, and then these are the points along. So if the price is P up there, that is point A, the quantity there will be Q. There you see. So let's see when the price is decreasing, dropping down to P1, and then the quantity will be Q1. This simply tells you that if ever the monopolist is willing to sell an extra unit, it will have to lower its prices from P to P1, and then the quantity demanded will be increasing. However, the demand curve is relatively inelastic, unlike the one for the monopolistic, which will be discussed again next week, where we'll be comparing these two demand curves. The demand curve sloped downward from top left to the bottom right. The original price is P, this is P, and then original quantity is Q, which is, this is Q indicated. The firm decreased its price from P to P1, so the price has been lowered from P to P1 to increase its output from Q to Q1, so there's an error here. Point A indicates original price and the original quantity, and then point B indicates the combination of new price P1 and new quantity, which is Q1. And then we'll go further now to total revenues derivation. How do we derive total revenues? Here we have a table. So whenever we deal with the total revenue will start from 0 and increase until it's being maximized. Once it's being maximized, that simply tells you that it is no longer going up, it will be slowing down. So let's look at the table. At the quantity of 1, the price is 70, and then total revenue is 7, because TR, remember we say TR equals to P multiplied by Q. So 1 times 7 is 70. And then if quantity is 2, the price is 50, so 2 times 50 is 100. If quantity is 3, the price is 40. 3 times 40 is 120. If price is 4, the price is 30. 4 times 30 is 120. If price is 5, the quantity is 20. We say 5 times 20 is 100. But look at this. In this case, in quantity number 3, the price is 40. we have maximized our total revenue, meaning our total revenue cannot increase even further. In quantity 4, the total revenue remains being 120. So that simply means it cannot go up even further. Instead, it will be going down. It will be decreasing. Check, we're ascending here from 70, 100, 120. Then we stood at 120. There was no increase because we had already maximized total revenue, and then it went down to 100 because the satisfaction has been achieved, or maybe revenues have been achieved. You can't maximize your revenues and go further with receiving more, because in that case you have already reached maximum point. So these are the points indicating the increase in total revenues. That is 120. So we will also have a point similar, which is 120. Check here. This indicates 120 goes further to 120. So firstly, it was ascending, going up, ascending, going up. When it reaches the 3 as a quantity, it was maximized to 120, and then went further to remain as 120. So it does not increase even further. From then, it will be sloping down because it's already been maximized. Then this indicates the decline of what we call total revenues. There you see our TR. It increases sharp and go up until it reaches 120. Then after 120, it doesn't go further, meaning we have maximized our total revenue at that point. That is our TR, or total revenue. So this is our TR now, an explanation. TR is positive or upward sloping from quantity 1 to quantity 3. We can see it moved from here until quantity 3. So from this point to this point, it is upward sloping. You can see it's been increasing. It increased from 70. It increased from 70 to 120. It was the 0 then initial, then 70 to 120, meaning we will not receive anything above 120 because we have already maximized our total revenue at 120. Total revenue is maximized at quantity 4 as it remains at 120. So at Q4, we have maximized our TR because it is no longer increasing. It remains constant like in Q3. Beyond quantity 4, total revenues or TR start to be downward sloping as it sloped to 100 in the quantity 5. If you can check quantity 5, it has already sloped to 100, meaning it increases until it reaches maximum, is maximized, then it can start sloping down after being maximized. Then now we go further to average revenues, marginal revenues, and total revenue, the relationship. So here is the graph that we are having. So let me see the point that we are having here. That is our AR is to demand, and then our total revenue, like I illustrated, it goes up until it's being maximized, then we'll start sloping down until it becomes 0. And then that is our marginal revenues, cutting our axis in the middle there. And then we have 0 as a starting point there, and then 0, and then also that is our price, original price, and then that is P1, indicating that for the firm to sell an extra output, it must lower its prices. And then that is quantity indicated on total revenues, which is the quantity that is used to maximize total revenue. That is Q1 indicated in there. Then we have our cost and revenues on our vertical axis, and then we have our cost and revenues also on the second graph. Then we continue by having quantities in both. So this graph is now, in this case, complete. Let's check. The total revenue has increased until it reaches the maximum point. From here, it cannot increase even further. It will start to slope down until it becomes 0. So looking at the above graph, so the price is P, the quantity is Q. So in that case, our total revenues will be increasing until it reaches this point, meaning our P and Q are the points that allow us to maximize total revenues. From then, if we go to P1, it is no longer increasing, but it will be decreasing. Then it is sloping downward. Then the demand curve reflects that the higher the price, the lower is the quantity demanded. While the lower the price, the higher is the quantity demanded. Remember, consumers are always demanding more if the price is lower, and they demand less if the price is high. Then AR stroke D, meaning AR equal to D, indicate that the demand curve is the same as average revenue. MR lies below AR as usual. MR curve cuts horizontal axis in the middle, like you can see here, and then change in the price are reflected on the point along the demand curve. You can see this point and this point, and then total revenue increase until it reaches maximum limit, then it starts to be downward sloping. It has increased from 0, went up until it reached maximum, then it started to be downward sloping. The monopolies firm maximize its revenues or total revenues at P and Q. This is our P, and then this is our Q, meaning we maximize total revenue at this point given here. So you can be given a task to draw this graph and explain in your examination for June under the monopoly. The average cost and marginal cost curves, let's see. Obvious marginal cost is a Nike shape, and then we see our what we call average cost being a bowl shape as usual. Remember that our average cost always cuts marginal cost at its lowest point. Here we go with explanation. There are 2 points that are very important for you. MC curve is necessary as it determines the profit maximization for the firm when it intersects marginal revenue. AC curve is necessary to determine if the firm is making a profit, loss, or normal profit. The firm produces nothing on the downward sloping part of the MC. Whenever MC is still downward sloping like this, the firm will be producing nothing because our supply curve is upward sloping. So we cannot regard the part as supply curve because it is downward sloping. Supply curve should be upward sloping from this point going up. And then, the average cost curve always intersects marginal cost curve AC at its lowest point. Wherever AC is cutting MC, that means that's a lowest point. So whenever they ask you what the relationship between MC and AC, you will tell that the relationship is that AC always cuts MC at its lowest point. Now we move to the characteristics for the monopoly. It's also a possible essay. It can be given to you according to the examination guideline of 2021. Is written, discussed in detail, characteristics for the firm under the monopoly. So you must be able to discuss in detail. You list the characteristic, then you explain it. So there are many buyers. Under the monopoly, there are many buyers and one seller. There is one seller here under the monopoly. So under the monopoly, there are many buyers and one seller. So let's check. There is no competition. Only single firm exists under the monopoly. So under the monopoly, one seller exists to supply the entire market with a particular product, meaning the firm is the only supplier of a product to the entire market. There is no competition. The market is not accessible to new firms that are willing to enter the market. The single firm that is existing represents the entire industry since there is no competition. One seller completely controls the supply of goods or service to the entire market. There is no competition, remember. Only one seller exists to control the supply of the product within the entire market. So because the monopoly is the only supplier of the product in the market, its demand curve represents an individual firm as well as the entire market, like I mentioned before on the demand curve. For example, DBS is the only diamond seller and represents the total diamond industry, while Eskom is the only supplier of electricity and represents the entire electricity industry in South Africa. Products are unique. So if we talk about unique products, we mean products that are not similar to any other product within the market. They cannot easily be substituted. They are regarded to be heterogeneous. So heterogeneous products are unique without any clause. They cannot easily be replaced. If consumers cannot find the product in the single supplier, they go without the product. This leaves the consumers with no choice based on selling price, quantity, and the supply. They have only one supplier, they have only one price, they have the given quantity, they don't have any alternative choices given to them. Consumers therefore develop the dependency on the product sold by the monopoly because the monopoly remains the only supplier without any competitor. Firms are the price setters under the monopoly. Monopolies firms are price setters because they have the control or influence over the price. Monopolies always increase the price to decrease the output size and decrease the price to increase the output. This means that increased price results to less units of product sold, while reduced price results to high units of product being sold within the market. As much as monopoly has a control over the price, it does not have a control over the demand. The demand is therefore necessary for the firm to determine the price. So the demand acts as a signal to the firm to decide on the price of the product. If there is no demand for the product, there is no need for the firm to increase the price because consumers are demanding less. But if there's aggressively more demand, then producers can increase the price because they see that consumers are in need of the product without any choice. Firms under monopoly are represented by the downward sloping demand curve. So the demand curve, like I've explained before, for the monopoly is downward sloping, and this demand curve is relatively elastic. Why is this demand curve downward sloping? It is because the firm will always depend on the price to affect the size of the output to be sold or produced. So firms will always increase the price to what we call to produce less and decrease the price to produce more. Therefore, that creates the downward sloping or negatively sloping demand curve, which is known as relatively inelastic. The demand curve for the monopoly slope downward because the firm is the price setter. It can increase the price to reduce the output size and decrease the price to increase the output size. The monopoly demand curve is relatively inelastic. This happens because products produced by monopolies are unique. They don't have any other substitutes since market entry is completely blocked. The increase in the price does not affect the quantity demanded much, which means that the demand for the product is relatively inelastic. If ever the price increases and the product is highly needed by consumers, they won't be changing with huge margin on the demand. So the increase in price does not create huge change in quantity demanded. For instance, the price of electricity have increased in South Africa. However, the demand for electricity remains high. Why? From Eskom. Because the Eskom is the only supplier of electricity without any close substitute. Therefore, even if the price is rising, we remain demanding. There is no much huge change in the margin over the demand for the electricity in South Africa from Eskom. Also, the demand curve for the monopoly represent what we call the individual firm for the monopoly as well as the entire market. That is also very important. There are high barriers to entry. So the market entry is not accessible to new firms. The market entry is completely blocked. New firms are not able to enter the market. So market entry is completely blocked to new firms. New firms cannot enter the market, while existing firms cannot leave the market due to high barriers to entry that exist. The market is protected by high barriers to entry, which prohibit the entry of new businesses. There are some obstacles that exist in this market that block the entry of new businesses. Like discussed before, I've mentioned that this barrier to entry can either be artificial or natural. So there are indeed high barriers to, and that will result to the firm being the only supplier or producer of a unique product under the monopoly. Barriers such as patents, high startup cost or high capital, licensing, copyright, and economies of scale make it hard for new firms to enter the market. It becomes too difficult for other firms that are willing to enter because patents are there to block the entry of those businesses through legislation or rules and regulations. And then copyright and also licensing are there to ensure that firms cannot enter the market to produce that particular product. So that particular product will be produced by only one firm in that particular market. Also, economies of scale scares new business from entering the market because of the fact that firms that are faced by this economy of scale can find it difficult to compete with the firm that is faced by economies of scale. As a result, the competition does not exist in the market. If a firm is a pure monopoly, it does not have a competitor. There is no consumer choice. So under this kind of the market, consumers are not having any choice. There are no alternatives that are served. There is only one firm that is supplying that particular product. Either it's in the good quality or bad quality. They don't have any alternative product to choose from because there are no choices. There is no competition. Consumer choice is limited. The market does not provide alternatives for the consumers. Consumers may demand from the existing firms or go without the product. Since the product is not easily replaceable, the failure of the market to supply the product results to unavailability of the product in the market. If ever the firm cannot supply that particular product at the time, consumers will go without the product. For instance, if Eskom cannot supply us with electricity at a certain hour, that means we go without electricity because we have no other alternative supplier of electricity in South Africa so far. Efficiency. The market output is relatively small caused by no competition. So since there's only one supplier of the particular product, the market output is relatively less. Meaning, other consumers can go without the product. The firm is not having enough capacity to supply all consumers at the same time. As much as other consumers are getting the product available, others will be going without the product within the market. For that sake, we'll say there's a technical inefficiency within this kind of the market structure. There's productive inefficiency because some consumers are not satisfied by the product because it is not available in desired quantities. Since the firm is the only supplier of a unique product for the entire market, inefficiency is okay with result to undersupply of the product. So the product will be undersupplied. For instance, electricity in South Africa is undersupplied due to the fact that the firm is the only supplier of the product without any alternative. For instance, Eskom is the only supplier of electricity in South Africa. Technical problems in this monopoly result to power supply reduction. Production inefficiency is possible. Productive efficiency is possible in the monopoly, but generally unlikely because there is no incentive for the firm to improve its efficiency. There is no incentive. Remember, incentive will be coming from a high level of competition. If the firm does not have any competitor within the market, then the firm will remain inefficient because nothing is pushing it. For instance, if we talk about the Eskom, it is not even profit motive. It simply provide the product on behalf of the government. Therefore, there is no incentive for the firm to become productive efficient. Allocative inefficiency okay in the monopoly firm. If the monopoly firm is unable to supply the optimum quantity of goods and services as desired by consumers. So allocative inefficiency will prevail if allocated resources are underutilized. You have enough resources. For instance, you have enough coal available in South Africa to produce electricity. However, you find that we still have an issue of load shedding. That results to allocative inefficiency because resources are available, but they are being underutilized. You find that there are more power stations that are closed. So if they are closed, we don't have enough electricity. That means there's an allocative inefficiency caused by the fact that there are more resources available, but they are underutilized. And then the firm enjoys economic or supernormal profit in both short run and long run if ever average revenues are more than average cost or total revenues are more than total cost. Monopolist firm can make supernormal profit in both short run and long run. And then this market condition can prevail if average revenues of the firm exceed average cost or when total revenues exceed total cost within the firm. The entire market share belongs to one firm. So the firm does not have any competitor. It does not share consumers with other competitors. So the whole market share is dominated by one firm. So it is a dominant firm that's dominating everything within the market because it is the only supplier of this unique product. If firm's average cost exceeds average revenues or total cost exceeds total revenues, the firm makes economic loss. High prices prevail. Under the monopoly, the firm tend to exploit consumers to higher prices because they don't have any alternative product to choose from. Monopolies exploit consumers with high prices. They always increase the price to decrease the output. Fewer products are made available at the higher prices. Monopoly's firm easily asks for high prices because it does not have competitors. This results to the monopoly, two products made available only for those who can afford. Those that cannot afford go without the product because products are too expensive for them. Complete market information. Under the monopoly candidates, there is a complete market information. The market information is totally complete because the firm does not have any incentive to earn or to receive if it's hiding information because it is highly protected by the law. Other firms are restricted from entering the market by barriers to entry. So hiding information does not have any profit. Instead, it will be resulting to consumers not being to discover relevant information about the pricing and the product itself. Buyers and sellers have access to full information about the prevailing market condition. Monopoly has a high degree of transparency as there is no incentive from hiding information from consumers. Asymmetric information. Remember, asymmetric information occurs when one party has more information than another party. That creates the principal agent information that is known as asymmetric information. It does not exist in the monopoly. Buyers and sellers have common information about the product pricing and the market, and the market for the product. There is no collusion. Under the monopoly candidate, there is no collusion. Remember, the firm is the only supplier of the unique product, so it does not have any other competitor, so it cannot collude. Collusion does not exist, either implicit or explicit, because the firm is the single supplier of the product. So collusion is an illegal anti-competitive practice that occurs when two or more firms in the same industry act dependently or dependently, implicitly or explicitly to manipulate market conditions in their advantage. The entire market is dominated by a single supplier without any rivals under the monopoly. Therefore, there is no collusion. The monopolist does not have any competitor to collude with, which means collusion is irrelevant and impossible in this market because the firm is the only supplier of the product. Profit and loss. So in this case now, we will be explaining profit and loss for the firm under the monopoly, including normal profit. These are the equilibrium positions. It's also a possible essay. You can be instructed according to the exam guideline to discuss in detail 2 equilibrium positions for the firm under the monopoly. So you must be able to draw those graphs and explain them and show those conditions. Economic profit conditions. Graphically now we are going, so please follow me. Economic profit prevails when revenues earned are greater than costs incurred in the business. It also regarded as a supernormal profit or abnormal profit for the business. Average cost curve tends below average revenues. For the firm to make a profit, average cost must tend below average revenues, which will lead to the firm's revenue being more than the cost incurred in the business. Average revenues exceed average cost, meaning AR will be greater than AC. Economic profit also prevails if total revenues exceed total revenues exceed total costs incurred in the business. That means TR will be more than TC. The economic profit condition indicates that more revenues are earned after sales as compared to the cost incurred during the production process. So the money received after sales is more than the money spent in the production. Economic profit can be calculated in 2 ways, namely, we say profit equal to AR minus AC times Q, or we can say profit equals to AR, open the bracket, AR times Q, close the bracket, minus, open the bracket, AC times Q, which is reversing back to TR minus TC. Here we have the graph that is indicating economic profit or supernormal profit. It is very important for you to note where does the average cost tend. So this is our MC as marginal cost being an X shape, you can see, and then that is MC indicated. And then remember, as usual, we have your price or cost and revenues on your vertical and then quantity on your horizontal. Then here we go. We have our average cost. They are turning below average revenues. Why I'm saying that? This point here, where that touches the average revenues, it is 150. That means these are the revenues for the business, because it touches our average revenues. Anything below will be meaning that the firm is making economic loss if AC is turning below. You can see our costs for doing the business were 90, but revenues we received are now 150. How much is the quantity? The quantity is 110. That means the firm is making economic profit or supernormal profit. That is AC. And then we see the shaded area there indicating economic profit. Why we say it's economic profit? Because our average revenues are greater than average cost. Costs are here, revenues are here. Costs are 90, revenues are 150. Then the firm is making economic profit or supernormal profit. And then the point here where MR equals to MC, remember, it indicates the profit maximization point, where MR equals to MC, indicated by point E. Point E is the profit maximization point where MR equal to MC. The firm makes economic profit because AR is more than AC. AC tends below AR. Shaded area indicates economic profit. Profit calculated equals to AR minus AC. AR equals to 150 minus AC, which is 90, times quantity, which is times 110. Then we get our 6,600 positive. That's a profit made by the business. Then economic loss condition. Economic loss prevails when revenues earned are lower than costs incurred in the business. Average cost curve tends above average revenues. And then also average costs are greater than the average revenues. AC is more than AR for the firm to make economic loss. Economic loss also prevails when total costs are more than total revenues, or TC is more than TR. Economic loss condition indicate that less revenues are earned after sales compared to the cost that incurred during the production process in the business. And then we continue. Economic loss condition. If the firm faces economic loss, no gain has been earned by the firm on its operations. This generally means that expenses of the business are more than income earned by the business after sales. Under this condition, the firm decides either to continue producing the product or not. The firm will decide if ever the economic loss is even more severe to the point that the firm cannot afford to cover its variable cost, then the firm can exit the market. So, but the firm can also stand while making economic loss if the loss can still be manageable. Economic loss can be calculated in two ways. We say economic loss equals to AR minus AC times Q, or AR, open the bracket, AR times Q, close the bracket, minus, open the bracket, AC times Q, or which is equals to TR minus TC. It is the same way as we calculate economic profit, but we get different answers in there. Let's check now. We have our vertical axis with our should be cost here. There are 200 revenues. You can see here is touching revenues. It's 100, meaning our costs are more than revenues. Then the quantity is 60. Then let's see our MR being downward sloping. Then our AR equals to T. Let's check that is our marginal cost as usual. And then our MC is indicated. There is our AC. Where does our AC turn? It's turning above the box in there. So this shaded box in there that is indicated, which is red, it is indicating economic loss because the costs incurred in the business are 200, but revenues received by the business are only 100. For that sake, we say the firm is making economic loss because income received is more than expenses of the business. We spent more than what we received after sale. For that sake, we say the firm is making economic loss. Here is the explanation. Point E is the profit maximization point as usual, where MC equal to MR. This is the point. And then the firm makes economic loss because AC is more than AR. Look at this. Our AC here, there is the turning point of AC, equals to 200. And then AR is equals to, this is the point where this touches AR, equals to 100. That simply means AC is more than AR. Then the firm is making economic loss. So we continue. Average cost curve turns above average revenues. You can see that AC is just turning above. AR is here. This is the point. But it's turning slightly above. That simply indicates that to you the firm is making economic loss. Shaded area indicates economic profit. You can see that this area that is shaded in red is indicating that the firm is making economic loss. So let's see the loss calculation here. We'll say loss equals to AR minus AC times Q. It will be this 100, here is 100, minus 200, and then multiplied by 60. This is 6 as a quantity. It gives us negative 6,000. Then the firm is making economic loss of negative 6,000. And then we go to the normal profit or break even. Remember, the normal profit occurs when revenues earned by the business are equal to the cost incurred the business. That simply tells you that average revenues must be equal to average cost, or total revenues must be equal to total cost. We call this the minimum earning that prevents the firm from leaving the market. So the firm in this case is not making a profit, neither a loss. If the firm has spent 5,000 to produce, it receives 5,000 after sales. That is regarded to be a normal profit. So normal profit prevails when revenues earned by the business are equal to the cost that incurred in the business. Average cost curve turns on the average revenues curve. Average revenues equal to average cost, or total revenue equal to the total cost. So AC equal to, AR equal to AC, or TR equals to TC. That's when the firm is breaking even. We call that the break even. The normal profit condition indicates that revenues earned are equal to the cost incurred in the business during the course of the production. We continue with the conditions. The normal profit is also known as the break even, since the firm is not making a profit, neither a loss. The expenses that the business incurred during the production process. So that gives us what we call a normal profit. Normal profit can be calculated as follows. Normal profit equals to AR minus AC times Q. If ever the firm is making economic loss, the point where MC equals to MC equal to MR is known as a loss minimization point. It's not the profit maximization. Because the firm is making a loss, it is known as a loss. on the loss, where MR equal to MC, it's a loss minimization point.
The road to success is to commit to yourself. In order for you to become who you want to become as a student, you need to commit to reading your books, to studying, to bettering yourself. I know it's not going to be easy. Actually, no one said it's going to be easy. But if you put in the work, the results will show in your life. Tap into your power. Sometimes you will feel like putting away your books, and not reading as much as you're supposed to be. But I want you to commit, because through commitment, there is infinite power.
So as we continue with the normal profit, sorry about that, there was a technical error again. So the normal profit, remember I've mentioned that it occurs when the firm's revenues are equal to the cost that incurred in the business. So here we go. There will be no box either up or down here. The normal profit will simply indicate that average costs are turning exact on the average revenues. Check this AR. Let me see how much is our average revenues. Our AR equals to 300 at quantity of 100. Now, how much is the AC? AC is simply turning along the 300 on the AR. That means the firm is making the normal profit, which means the firm is not making a profit, neither a loss. That's a break even. So, let's check. We'll be calculating the normal profit, which will give us 0. The quantity is 100, and then the point where MC equals to MR, the firm is maximizing its profit, meaning this becomes the profit maximization output, and the profit maximization price. Then let's check. Point E is the profit maximization point where MR equal to MC. The firm makes the normal profit because AC equal to AR. AC turns along AR. You can see it's turning along here. And then the firm breaks even since the firm doesn't make a profit, neither a loss. And then normal profit equal to AR minus AC times 2. 300, which is this one, minus 300, which is this one for the cost, times 100. It gives us 0. So the firm is not making a profit, neither a loss. Then we call that a normal profit. So example of an assessment for the monopoly. It says draw a fully labeled graph to show the economic loss in a monopoly market structure. But before we draw, it is very important for you to know the following. If ever the question says, illustrate or with the aid of graph, explain the long run equilibrium for the firm under the monopoly. What does that mean to you? Let me just go back slightly. So the long run equilibrium will mean to you the firm is making economic profit in both short run and long run. So I will be using this. Okay. Okay, I want to draw the graph here. If they say draw the long run equilibrium, these are costs or revenues. This is the output or quantity. And then you have your what you call your 0 here. And then you have your AR equals to D. And then you have your MR cutting down there. And then we have this box there. The firm enjoys economic profit in both short run and long run. That simply tells you that as we have our MC, this is MC here. Our AC must turn here below. So we are shading the area here. Maybe it is 10, it's 5, the quantity is 2. AC will be turning at this point. This is AC. However, because we are dealing with the long run equilibrium, it will be LAC, LMC, standing for long run marginal cost and long run average cost. It is very important for you to know that if they say explain the long run using the graph, you draw economic profit, but on your MC you say LMC, long run marginal cost. On your AC you say long run average cost. That is very important. So we can move on now to the next slide, which is assessment. Draw a full label graph to show economic loss in the monopoly market structure. This was cited from November-December 2020 National Examination for Economics. So here is the graph being drawn here. So to show economic profit, you can see this is our MR as usual, this is our AR, and then already we are seeing something here, and then we have our MC as usual being an egg shape, and then MC equal to MR at this point, which is E, which is known as the loss minimization, and then we have our AC being a bowl shape, is turning above what we call above the MR, above the AR. So it's above AR, meaning our what we call our costs are 10, our revenues are 8, then the firm is making economic loss in this case. And then our profit area is shaded in there. You have those teeth that are indicating. And then this is the explanation. Let's see. Allocation of marks. Correct labeling of axis is 1 mark, where you write the quantity and the price. And then correct drawing, positioning of, and labeling of MC. There is MC, is also 1 mark. And then correct drawing, positioning of AC. You can see AC is turning on the right point there. It's above AR. It's also 1 mark. Correct drawing or positioning, labeling of MR. You can see MR is cutting our, what you call, our horizontal axis in the middle. It's 1 mark. And then it's also below AR. Correct drawing or positioning and labeling of AR. You can see AR is above MR there. Then it is correct in the, even though it is touching our axis, meaning that it can be 0. So that's a mark also. And then loss minimization point. There is point E, which is a loss minimization point. It's also 1 mark. Indication of economic loss. It is indicated by shaded area. The shaded area indicates economic loss. It worth 2 marks. So let's check it. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it is very important for you to follow. If you ever they say draw the graph and explain, draw the graph and interpret the graph. If they say draw the graph to show economic loss, then you must know how are marks allocated. Almost everything that is given on this graph or that has been drawn by the candidate worth a mark. Only the shaded area worth 2 marks. So it is very important for you to draw the graph and be able to interpret the graph. For instance, let's say we have to interpret the graph. We will say here point E indicates the profit maximization point, and then we will say revenues are equals to 8. Here they are, and then cost are equals to 10, meaning they're above. And then we'll say the value of cost, meaning which is our costs are AC, which is 10. We will say also shaded area indicates economic loss. So you must shade the area, then you say it indicates economic loss. That is the interpretation. And then the quantity, which is 5, is a loss minimization output, and then the 10 is the loss minimization price. So it is very important for you to indicate such if you are given a chance to draw the graph. And then also correct labeling on axis. Remember, there is a labeling of axis and labeling on axis. If you are labeling on axis, that means you are putting numbers here where they are supposed to be. So it is very important also for you to know those things. They worth marks if you are given the graph. So the maximum for this was only 8 marks. And then with the 8 graph, explain relationship between marginal revenue demand curve from November, December 2021. Let's check. This is the graph that was drawn. So let's see. The marks were 4 only for the graph. Let's see then what is happening on the explanation here. There is the graph. Then what is expected? Marginal revenue curve, with the exception of the first unit, will lie below DD. You can see it's lying below. And then the demand curve AR is negatively sloping, which results to more goods being sold at the lower price. Hence, the additional revenue MR will decrease. And then MR curve intersect the horizontal axis at the point halfway between origin and AR curve. Yes, we have seen that it's touching there. The monopolies will always set the price above the point A. So it will set the price above the point A on AR curve because marginal revenue will be positive. This worth 8 marks. And then after all, I thank you, and I believe this lesson will have a great impact as we prepare for you to examination. I will see you again next Friday when we'll be dealing with oligopoly and monopolistic competition. Thank you. Bye-bye.